Hello and welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. My name is Ted Meissner. Glad you could be here. And before we get started, if you would, please remember to subscribe to this podcast, not just for you, but it helps other people to find this podcast. In the late 70s, NASA launched the Voyager 1 probe. And in 1990, the astronomer Carl Sagan asked them to turn Voyager 1 around as it was passing Saturn and take a picture and see what was there. This became known as the pale blue dot picture because Earth was less than a pixel in size, just a very tiny, tiny dot. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about sustainability, which I think is one of the most important things and crisis of our time. And not just our time, but ongoing. So let's talk with my friend Margaret Fletcher about an upcoming event to explore this more fully and how mindfulness can make a difference with it. Our guest today is Margaret Fletcher. Margaret, good to see you again. And thank you so much for being here. It's been, well, an interesting past couple of years for us. I'm wondering if you might start by just saying a little bit about who you are for those who might not have met you before.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you for inviting me into this podcast and just this time together with you and with all of you who are listening in. And so, yeah, I'm Margaret Fletcher, and I find myself here. I'm leaning out to look out my window. Concord, New Hampshire. That's right out my window. I am an MBSR teacher and teacher trainer. I've been teaching MBSR since 2009, and love that way of teaching. I did some teaching before that through my home sangha and a small organization here in New Hampshire, a non-dual teacher, and but found that MBSR is just it's a powerful format for inviting people into wakefulness in their lives and in our collective being. So I trained at the Center for Mindfulness at UMass Medical School. That's where you and I met, Ted. And but that was when I had begun to work there, and soon enough you came along and you were working there as well. And it was there that I trained to teach aspiring MBSR teachers to come into this way of offering with others. And then in 2019, the center closed. And at that point, there were two of us who were the remaining teacher trainers. I would say senior teacher trainers. There were others, adjunct and so forth, but Rebecca Eldridge and I formed East Coast Mindfulness, an online center for gathering around mindfulness for teaching, for study practice. And so I continue to do my main teaching through East Coast Mindfulness, although I'm not helping to run the business anymore. Rebecca's doing that primarily, fully now, and I'm there as teacher and mentor, a little bit of teacher training still. And since I stepped back from the work at East Coast Mindfulness, something that had been in my heart for a long time, and a great desire to do something for this planet. And I didn't know what that would be. And as that space opened up, I just felt the earth come rushing in and say, me, now, us, this. And so I really heard that and followed it into practice primarily first, but then also the recognition. I was scratching my head like, but what will I do? I'm engaging in a deeper earth awareness practice, and maybe I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. But as a result of that, the question of what could I do? And I've done a lot of things in my life. I kind of have a checkered professional path. I was an accountant for a while. I was in management operations. I've done things. I've run a retail store, owned, operated, and closed a retail store. So I was, I had ideas like maybe I should go work for a solar installation company. I got some skills, management, or maybe I'll just learn how to install panels. I really wanted to do something. And then it just occurred to me, I'm 62 years old, going to be 63 in a couple of weeks. Maybe there's just something I've already really developed that I could work in that arena. That would be the smartest thing to do. I want to be smart, efficient. And that's when the idea of, well, the same situation I found myself in, which is that my teaching needed to be upgraded to bring in the plight of this planet effectively, authentically. And if I'd been scratching my head about that, probably other teachers had been too. And so how about I come up with a way to bring teachers together so that we can do that. We can do that work together. So that's really my main work focus now.
Yeah. Thank you for that background. And there's so much there. I think in particular, what's landing with me now is that, like the others that I've had on this podcast and that we know and have worked with over the years, is that it's not a day job. What we do, it is part of core of who we are, and it evolves over time,
Mm, yeah.
and that changes, and that brings a richness to it. One of the things I want to explore with you before we get into really our main topic here, because it is related, is this idea of sustainability. And that's a pretty big topic. It's not just climate change, there are other aspects to this as well. And I'm wondering if you could say a bit about what got you interested in this very broad field of sustainability.
Mm. Well, yeah. The first thing I want to say is just for anyone who's here interested early um, in the time is that we've got this webinar coming up, and you said we're going to get to what we really mean to talk about. And so it baked right into the title of this March 7th, 2025 webinar is the word sustainability. So awareness, care, and sustainability for our Earth. And and so folks, there are six of us from the field of contemplative practice and Earth awareness and the desire for sustainability for ourselves as individuals in community and in our collective world. That's a word that we picked right out and said that's a big piece of this. So I guess I'll just say I have had a lifelong recognition that I need to recycle. I need to buy less. This is all coming. I can remember in high school, Ted, I remember learning about the greenhouse effect. And I was a debater in high school. And every year, the US National Debate Organization would pick a topic. And one of the topics one year was energy use. And we learned about the greenhouse gas effect. So I've known since I was 16 years old that this was a situation. And I'm embarrassed to say that I did my little bit, a little bit, a little bit. It's what I did. I don't know. Embarrassed, maybe that's kind of a strong statement. But when I look back, I can say, I wish I had, heard harder, listened better. And here I find myself in, it's like my early 60s and saying, now I'm really here to do the work that I feel, well, if I want to be able to look my grandkids in the eyes, and when they ask me, which I hope they do, here's this world that we're in. What did you do? I need to have an answer. And so sustainability for me is about my grandchildren and their friends and the more than human beings, the life of this planet that they will have. that's what sustainability is about for me, is keeping in my heart the me who was 16 who just didn't get inspired, but I can do something now, and that can pay forward.
Yeah. I think that pay forward concept and the words that arrived for me as you were speaking were around legacy. What am I leaving to what comes after me? It doesn't end here. It continues on. And the ability to make that as best a world as you can, leaving no trace from my hikers and campers who are listening to this, are familiar with those principles, that applies here too. And of course, with 2020 hindsight, whether it's looking at us as way back when, or whether it's more broadly speaking, as a society, as a world, and the various cultures and peoples within it, there's 2020 hindsight there too. But there's always this moment of what we might do right now. And one of the things that we could do right now is talk about this upcoming event. Tell us about that and how that came about.
Yeah. Well, you, I think, are connected with Bruce Barrett. I know he's been on the podcast, and he was here last July. So as I began to do this, just began to move from my own practice into what can I do? I'll also mention too that I have some financial support from an organization called the Bess Family Foundation. And so because there's like, okay, is there a job for an earth awareness meditation teacher? I couldn't find that job listing, as often happens with folks in the mindfulness field. So I began to do some work around this, and I had been in contact with them as part of my own learning. But I contacted that foundation and said, I think there's something here for the MBSR teachers, and they really picked that up and said, yes, we'll support you in that. So I want to give some gratitude to them for making it possible for me, because I still have a family and a household, and I got to keep the lights on and so forth. So as I began to move from my own practice into how could I use what I have and expand and invite some other teachers in, I reached out to Bruce because he has had a program in place for quite some time, Mindful Climate Action. He's a professor and runs a lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I emailed him. He said, I'll meet with you. And we started talking. And I just so appreciated having a colleague in the MBSR field. I've found others since then, but I want to say right now, if you're listening and you identify yourself as an MBSR or MBCT or in some way one of these MBIs, you're a teacher, maybe a teacher trainer, and you feel strongly about this earth awareness component. Maybe you've done some work in it, maybe you've done a lot, research, etc. I want to meet you. Please be in contact with me. Anyway, so Bruce and I hit it off, and after a little while, I had put together a 6-session workshop for MBSR and now plus MBCT teachers to take them through something like the process that I had been through over a couple of years, to consider for ourselves this practice and then in our teaching a little bit, but mostly it's about if I can connect with the practice myself, how will it come out into my teaching, as often happens in MBSR. So I'm giving you a long answer, Ted, bear with me. So I reached back out to Bruce at that point after I had run one of the webinars, one of the workshops, and I said, I think we could do a webinar and we could bring some interest to your program and to my program. I need to, build awareness of this, just point blank awareness, and some people will find out about it, will want to come and do this workshop. And he was game. He said, yeah, let's do a webinar. So it started there. And then a little while later, he said, hey, Christine Wamsler and Liane Stephan, they would be really great ads. And I had already made connections with those two and said, oh my gosh, yes. So we started working. It's been, almost 8 months, I think, that we've been working on it, just slowly considering what to say about it, what we would do, etc. And we finally came up, we posted the description of it just a little bit in December. And folks from the organizing group at the Mindfulness World Community pretty much immediately contacted me and said, this is such it's such synchronicity, because we were just talking about that needs to be the next big focus, the next big gathering. And we were planning it 2 days before yours. And so never mind that, because you've got something really good going. We'll just support this. And so then Jamie Bristow and John Kabat-Zinn agreed, so they'll be part of it. So now we have this 6-person panel, and Ted, you and Katrina Mullen have agreed to be, tech support behind the event. So we've got a really great team together, and it's all in service to inviting all of us in the field, anyone who's a meditator, teacher, mindfulness teacher, MBSR, any of the MBIs, to come together and consider these same matters of what does it mean to be alive on the earth and the situation it's in right now, and the historical position that we're in, with the future that we're looking at. What does it mean for us as teachers, and how can we use our life energy and skill to support this planet that needs us, and all the interconnected web of life, all the beings and more than human beings that are affected by our choices. That's the webinar, and there's going to be some research presented, and there'll be some of us talking about the programs that we're offering. We'll have time, people have time together to talk to a few others, like small group and then large group dialogue. There'll be some practice, of course. And then lots and lots of resources afterwards. So this is one of the big goals, is to gather as many people together in the resources, and just to like build community and power behind the ideas here.
Thank you for that overview of it. And one of the things that I'm most enthusiastic about with this particular webinar is that this is a demonstrable shift in this progression of going from conflict to competition, which may be friendly or not, to partnerships, which are more point in time and short-lived, to what I'm seeing here, which is true collaboration. That this is not owned by any one organization or person. This is people coming together for a common cause long term, and the open and free support of that, us giving time and hoping some impact for the participants. And that's really what I want to ask about next, is what are some of your hopes for people who are participating, what they might come away with from this event?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Ted, how about right here on this interview, we do a little tiny practice together, and then I could maybe speak from that, and that'll connect back into what we want to achieve in that webinar. So I wonder where you are. Do you have a window? Like I have a window right here. Do you have a window handy? Okay.
I do.
So
It's right over there, but it's covered up right now because it messes with the light for your recording.
all right. Well, I think you'll be able to work with me here. And you friends on the, who are listening in, you're going to see us look away, and you look away too. Let's do this together. So oftentimes we talk, we say something in teaching, like, just dropping into the moment, right? So let's do that together. And you might, in the way that you do that, maybe your eyes just soften, and you feel into sensations in the body, and something strengthens about here-ness and now-ness. And you might just receive for yourself any thoughts that are playing out, or emotions, feelings. We can just do a little check-in with ourselves. That's very common. And if your eyes have closed now, I'm going to invite you to open them. And if you've got a window, it might be really helpful to just move your gaze out and look out the window. And there's another domain that's always here, and it's the vastness of this world. This breathing body is an expression of. And there's a living being right outside my window. It's a silver maple. No leaves on it right now because it's January. All these tiny red buds that will become leaves in a few months. And it's just swaying a little bit in the breeze. Alive. A really tremendous support to all the life in this neighborhood. Source of oxygen for me. I need that every moment of my life. It's a home for squirrels. There's a great squirrel nest right there in the crook of the tree. And there's little squirrel prints in the snow all over the backyard. Families of trees and squirrels and earthworms, crows. And here's the awareness that is right here in the breath in the body and the beating heart and the blowing wind and the squirrel prints. So that's a little, I don't know, maybe that was a couple of minutes mindful moment.
It's a lovely moment, and thank you for the guidance, Margaret. And outside my window, I was imagining this because it's a view that I really deeply connect with. Outside, it's a magnolia tree for me with its fuzzy little buds and the remains of not less than 3 birds' nests in it that are left over from this past summer. And I was thinking about just last night and early this morning getting up, because as of this recording, it's a beautiful bright full moon last night and early this morning. And just the lovely quiet of the early riser time of 4 a.m. and just having a little bit of that stillness and that depth is quite lovely. So thank you so much for bringing that guidance in.
Yeah, you're welcome. And, you and I both know as teachers that often if we're asking our students, maybe early on in a series class, how do you touch into your own well-being, or what's something in your life that evokes this kind of feeling of well-being? And people often talk about being in nature. We know this. So we know it, but do we actually caretake it like as a source, a resource for well-being, for settling, for connecting? And I want to say, in the way that I've been taught and inspired over the decades now of practice, that that's been there, but I think it could be stronger. I think it could be a lot stronger in the way that we're teaching. So this is just so that's a bit of a soapbox for me. I'll just name it. think it's a pretty great soapbox to get on at this point. And I think we're going to hear from folks who can speak to the research during the webinar. That's not me, but I was just struck by this one little thing that showed up in my news feed recently. It was a study that was published in Wired magazine about how they had these little kids at a daycare, and they had a kind of a paved over place where they could play, and then there was one that had dirt and more like it was green space. And they measured what happened to kids who just played on the paved and just played on the green space. Their skin microbiome and gut microbiome both improved when they spent not that much time, but just some time playing in the dirt, getting dirty. Their gut microbiome registered as having an improved variability, and the immune function was shown to increase for those kids who got exposure to green space. So, I mean, like, there's probably all kinds of, I know there is lots of nature-based research that can talk about like measured effects of that. And then, and this is just on a really small level, just talking about the gut microbiome, but talk about the individual health that we all can feel when we let go of the such strict human pathways that we stay on. So one of the ways that the practice that I just guided us in, one of the things it's done to me, it's kind of given transparency to the walls that I'm in. So I feel like I can sort of sense in and touch into more about what's going on around me outside the strict pathways of technology, of walls, of, highways. I feel like there's been an expandedness here that's happened with other teachers who have taken the workshop that I've led. So beyond my microbiome and what we could measure about that, there's what I feel in my own being, what it's like to be in community with people through that cultivation, and also just my sense of my responsibility and love for this planet. So these are the things that I know my colleagues are going to speak to in their own fabulous ways, with all of the experience and research and writing and thinking that they've been done. Jamie Bristow is going to be there. John Kabat-Zinn is going to be there. And so I think this is going to be a really tremendous opportunity.
Yeah. And appreciate all of your work and those of your partners on this, and completely agree with the impact and influence of being in nature and what that's like. There is a reason I have this background. There is a reason that the bookends to every episode of this video podcast series is outdoors. Walking or sitting, it's out there. It's being part of that because it makes such a difference. And just for our last question for this conversation is that tackling sustainability and the challenges that we face with climate action and our one pale blue dot of a planet is, what might you say or suggest to those who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed by that? What are some thoughts that you might share with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say one thing is to slow down, to slow down the feeling of the feelings that we have around this, anxiety and grief. The first move we might think we need to make is to rush and do something. And that's kind of an old habit for a lot of us. And we've been built into it and cultivated into it. And it's like we can just use the same rush, speed, and anxiety to move into that thing. And we're probably just going to build this more of the same for ourselves and for our world. So sit back, find out what's going on for yourself, first of all. and the really good caretaking, that might lead you into lots of directions, and a more nature informed or earth aware, I'll say, earth aware practice could be that for you, and that's wonderful. But even just like the slowing down to, recognize the earth can show us really the speed at which things can sanely unfold. And if I just slow myself down enough like that, I'll get away from technology some, because that speeds me up. So I'll get away from that. I'll get away from a whole lot of consumerism, because technology pushes me on that. And if I need to run around and do something, I probably got to buy something new to get it done, or jump on a plane to get it done, or. So if we could all just like sit back and find the good in ourselves and relish that, and maybe start to connect with others around that, that might be a really good first step.
Yeah. Well said. And it's not about having to check a box or completely change everything all at once, but being part of the journey. And what's that like? So thank you, Margaret, for all of that. And for those who are watching and listening, I will have several links where links are found on these podcasts, including more information about the event that's coming up, Awareness, Care, and Sustainability for Our Earth. Our guest today, Margaret Fletcher. Thank you so much for being here, Margaret. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Ted. Very, very, very sweet to spend time with you.
Thank you for joining today, for listening, Margaret, for all of your work and dedication on this. We appreciate that very much. For those of you who are still here, again, please do be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Remember that every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can, because the world needs you. This is our only place. There is no backup planet, and there are no do-overs. But together we can make a difference. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.